My son stopped talking to me after I gave his brother my house. My name is Clara, though most folks around town call me Grandma Clara now. I've lived in this little white house on Maple Hill for more than 40 years. Its walls have held laughter, tears, Sunday dinners, and long, quiet nights when even the clock seemed to tick too loudly. But the truth is, I never built this home. My husband Thomas did. Every board, every nail, every window frame carries his touch. I still remember the first time I saw it. It wasn't much back then, just an empty lot, a patch of stubborn soil, and a man with a dream. Thomas stood there with a folded blueprint and a pencil tucked behind his ear. "This will be our home," he said. And I believed him, even though we didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. We built it slow, paycheck by paycheck, plank by plank. And when it was done, it felt like the world had finally given us a corner that belonged only to us. We raised 2 sons here, Daniel and Michael. They couldn't have been more different if they'd tried. Daniel was bold and ambitious, always reaching for something higher. Michael was quiet, steady as his father, more interested in fixing things than chasing them. I used to joke that one was the wind and the other was the ground, and that I loved them both because one lifted me and the other kept me steady. When Thomas passed away, lung cancer, years of hard work and hard air catching up to him, this house became my anchor. I didn't leave much those first months. I'd sit on the porch in his old chair, staring out at the garden he planted, half waiting to hear his boots on the gravel again. But silence was all that came. Eventually, I learned to fill it with small routines. Tea at dawn, letters to my church friends, folding laundry that didn't need folding. That's what grief does. It teaches you how to live quietly. Years rolled by and my boys built their own lives. Daniel moved to the city. Sharp suits, long hours, big promises. Michael stayed nearby, working as a mechanic, never asking for much. He'd stop by every Sunday to mow the lawn, fix a hinge, or just have coffee with me. He'd say, "You're too old to climb ladders, Ma." And I'd laugh, telling him I wasn't old, just seasoned. Those were good days. Then, a few years ago, my health started giving me trouble. Nothing dramatic at first, just the sort of things age likes to whisper about when it thinks you're not listening. My doctor called it age-related fatigue. I called it slowing down. Around that time, I started to think about what would happen to the house after I was gone. It wasn't about money, it was about memory. Every nail in these walls held a story, and I wanted those stories to stay in the family. I told both my sons I was updating my will and that the house would go to whoever I thought could take care of it best. It wasn't a threat, just an honest conversation. Daniel said he respected whatever I decided. Michael said, "It'll always be your home, Ma." I spent weeks thinking. Daniel had a big apartment, a good job, and a wife who loved city lights more than sunsets. Michael lived in a small rental near the garage. He never complained. But I knew he could use the stability. And, truth be told, he loved this place as much as Thomas and I did. So one evening, I made my choice. I called the lawyer, signed the papers, and left the house to Michael. It wasn't about favoritism, it was about legacy, about knowing the roses in the garden would still be tended, that the porch would still echo with laughter. When Daniel found out, though, his voice changed. He called me that night, late, when the house was dark and quiet. "Ma," he said, "is it true? You're giving Michael the house?" "Yes," I told him gently. "I've thought about it carefully. You could have told me first. I didn't want to make it a competition." He laughed, but it wasn't his usual laugh. "Competition? It's about fairness." I tried to explain that Michael had less, that he was nearby to care for it, that Daniel had his own life built elsewhere, but I could hear the hurt in his silence. He said, "So that's it? I'm not part of this home anymore?" I said, "You'll always be part of it, son, but every home needs a caretaker." He didn't respond for a long moment. Then quietly he said, "You always did like him better." Those words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to tell him how wrong he was, that love isn't divided like pie, that mothers don't measure it out with spoons. But before I could speak, the line went dead. He'd hung up. I sat there, holding the phone, feeling the cold hum of silence. The clock ticked, the house creaked, and I realized that for the first time, I didn't know how to reach my son. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel stopped calling. When I tried, his wife would answer and say, "He's busy, Mrs. Harper. He'll call when he can." But he didn't. Michael noticed the change. "He's upset," he said softly. "Give him time." "I've been giving him time his whole life," I said, trying to smile. I still baked lemon cake on his birthday, even when he didn't come by. I still sent Christmas cards, though they came back unacknowledged. And every evening, I'd sit on that same porch hoping maybe he'd drive up just once to tell me he understood. But silence can grow roots. It digs in, makes itself comfortable, and before long it becomes part of the landscape. One Sunday, while I was pruning the rose bushes, I saw Daniel's car slow down at the end of the road, the silver sedan he'd bought a year earlier. My heart leapt, but the car never turned into the driveway. It hesitated, then kept going. The dust trailed behind it like a sigh. That was the last time I saw him for nearly 3 years. Michael kept visiting, gentle as ever. We didn't talk about Daniel much. Sometimes we'd sit by the window in silence, watching the sunset reflect off the lake, both pretending we didn't see the emptiness between us. In those quiet years, I learned something about love. It's not always loud or certain. Sometimes it just waits, quietly, patiently, like a light left on in the hallway, hoping someone will find their way back home. And though my son had turned away, I never turned off that light. Because a mother's heart, no matter how cracked or tired, never forgets the sound of her child's footsteps. It's strange, isn't it? How a quiet house can still hold so much noise, the kind that doesn't come from creaking floors or ticking clocks, but from the thoughts that echo in your chest when the people you love stop calling. 3 years had passed since that last phone call from Daniel. The seasons came and went like chapters in a book I'd already read. Michael still stopped by every Sunday, and each time he did, he'd ask, "Have you heard from him?" And I'd say, "No, not yet." Then he'd nod softly and change the subject. He never pushed, and I never pretended I wasn't still waiting. One morning, while I was sitting by the window, watching the mail truck climb the hill, I thought about Thomas, my husband, my anchor. He used to say, "Promises aren't about paper, Clara. They're about people." He believed a man's word was worth more than his signature. And yet, all those years later, the very thing he built, this house, had become a piece of paper that tore my sons apart. That afternoon, I pulled out the old metal box from under my bed, the one where I kept all the family papers, birth certificates, tax forms, yellowing photographs, and there it was, the deed to the house with Michael's name on it. I traced it with my finger, thinking about the day I signed it. I could almost hear the scratch of the pen, the lawyer's voice saying, "It's done." I'd thought it was the right thing, the practical thing, but sometimes even the right choice can leave a wound behind. Later that week, I decided to call Daniel again, just to hear his voice. I dialed, waited, and listened to the long rings that went nowhere. Then, finally, a click. But it wasn't Daniel who answered. It was Lena, his wife. "Oh, Mrs. Harper," she said, her voice polite but chilly. "How are you?" "I'm all right, dear. Is Daniel home?" "He's busy with work. Can I tell him you called?" "Yes, please," I said softly. "Just tell him his mother misses him." She hesitated. "I'll let him know." But I never got that call back. Days turned into weeks again, and I kept living the only way I knew, one quiet day at a time. I watered the plants, wrote letters to friends who lived too far away, and baked bread I didn't really need. When you've been a mother as long as I have, you learn how to fill silence with small acts of love. One evening, Michael came by with groceries. He noticed the old box still open on my kitchen table. "What's that?" he asked. "Just papers," I said. The kind that hold too many memories. He smiled. You still worrying about the deed? I shook my head, though we both knew I was. Ma, he said gently, you did what you thought was right. I hope so, I whispered. I just don't want him to think I chose between my boys. Michael set the bags down and sat across from me. Maybe you didn't choose, Ma, he said. Maybe you just gave what you could to whoever needed it most. His voice was so calm, so steady, just like his father's used to be. And for the first time in a long while, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't ruined everything. The next morning, I woke to find an envelope slipped under my front door. No stamp, no address, just my name, Mom, written in Daniel's handwriting. My heart nearly stopped. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a short letter. Mom, I've been meaning to write for a while. I don't know how to start. Maybe I was wrong to cut you off. Maybe I wasn't. But I just couldn't understand it. You gave away the one thing Dad worked his whole life for, and you did it without telling me. It hurt, Mom. More than you know. I don't hate you. I just didn't know how to forgive you. Maybe someday we'll talk again. Daniel. The words blurred as I read them, not from age, but from tears. I didn't care about the apology or the excuses. All I saw was someday we'll talk again. That was enough. Hope is a small thing, but it can light up even the darkest room. I placed that letter inside my Bible between the pages of Psalm 27. Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. And that's what I did. I waited. Months passed quietly, until one late afternoon a knock came at the door. When I opened it, there stood a man I hadn't seen in years, Mr. Willis, our old family lawyer. Mrs. Harper, he said with a kind smile, I was in town and thought I'd drop by. There's a small matter we need to review about the deed. My stomach tightened. The deed? Yes, he said, setting his briefcase down. Michael came by a few weeks ago. He wanted to make sure everything was still in order. He said you were worried about it. I sighed. I suppose I was. He chuckled. That boy of yours loves this place, says it's the heart of your family. I smiled faintly. He's right about that. He flipped through the documents, checking the signatures. Then he looked up and said, It's all legal, Mrs. Harper, ironclad. Good, I said softly, though something inside me still felt heavy. He paused before closing his briefcase. You know, not every family fights over inheritance because of greed. Sometimes it's grief that makes people grab at what's left. Those words stayed with me long after he left. That night, I sat by the window again, looking out over the lake as the moon rose. I thought about all the promises we make, and the ones we break without meaning to. The paper said the house was Michael's, but my heart still said it belonged to all of us. I whispered into the stillness, Thomas, if you can hear me, help me make this right. Because I wasn't ready to leave this world with my family still broken. Not while there was still breath left in me, and love enough to try. Time has a way of softening sharp edges, but not always fast enough. The letter from Daniel had given me a flicker of hope, but months turned into years again. And that flicker dimmed until it was just a small ember I kept hidden in my heart. 3 years, that's how long it had been since I'd seen my eldest son's face. I kept track not with a calendar, but by the seasons. The winters that came and went without his visit. The birthdays where his chair stayed empty. The Christmases where I set a place for him anyway. Michael would still come by every Sunday, like clockwork. He'd fix something around the house, pour me tea, and pretend not to notice when I glanced at the road every time a car passed by. He never spoke poorly of his brother. That was just the kind of man he was. Gentle, grounded, forgiving in ways that made me proud and a little sad all at once. I often found myself replaying old memories, the kind that make the silence louder. Daniel, as a boy, standing in the yard with his first baseball glove, shouting for his father to watch. Michael beside him, smaller but eager, waiting for his turn. Thomas would laugh and say, "There's enough love here for both of you. Don't go fighting for more than your share." Back then, I never imagined they'd one day fight for something as lifeless as a deed. In the third spring since that last letter, I received another one, but this time it came from the hospital. It was brief. Daniel Harper, admitted advanced stage lung disease. Next of kin, Mrs. Clara Harper. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The letters blurred into shapes I didn't recognize. Lung disease, the same shadow that had taken Thomas. Michael came the very next morning, finding me still holding the paper in my hands. "Ma," he said softly, "you don't have to go if it's too much." But I did. Mothers always go, no matter how far, no matter how hurt. I packed a small bag and took the bus to the city. The hospital was one of those tall glass buildings that smell of bleach and quiet heartbreak. I found Daniel in a room overlooking the courtyard, pale, thinner than I remembered, but still my boy. When he saw me, he looked startled. "Ma," he whispered, "you came." I tried to smile. "You didn't think I'd stay away, did you?" He looked away, tears glinting in his eyes. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." "Don't be foolish," I said. "You're my son. There's no sickness or silence strong enough to change that." We talked, awkwardly at first, like strangers learning each other's language again. He asked about the house. I told him Michael was keeping it in good shape, that the garden still bloomed every spring. He nodded quietly. "I shouldn't have been angry. I felt like you gave him the last piece of Dad." I reached for his hand and he didn't pull away. "Oh, Daniel," I said softly, "your father built that house for love, not for ownership. He'd never want it to divide you." He squeezed my hand gently. "I know that now." For 2 weeks, I stayed with him, sleeping in the hospital chair, reading old psalms while machines hummed beside his bed. Sometimes he'd wake and say, "Ma, tell me something about Dad." And I would. I told him how Thomas used to hum when he worked, how he carved our initials into the porch beam, how he said the house was his way of promising me a forever. One night, Daniel whispered, "I wish I'd stayed closer, Ma. I thought success would make you proud." "You've always made me proud," I said, "even when you didn't call." He smiled faintly. I was stubborn. "Runs in the family," I teased. He laughed, a soft, wheezy laugh that broke my heart. Then, after a quiet moment, he said, "I've been thinking, Ma, maybe it's time I come home, even if it's just for a while." And I told him, "There's always a place for you. The porch light's still on." But sometimes life doesn't wait for plans. A week later, he took a turn for the worse. Michael came to the city that night, sitting by my side as doctors spoke in hushed tones. When it was over, the world went terribly still. I held Daniel's hand until it grew cold, whispering, "You're home now, my boy. You're home." The funeral was simple. Just family, close friends, a handful of old neighbors. Lena came, standing off to the side, tears streaking her face. When it was time to leave, she approached me. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I should have tried harder. He missed you, you know." I nodded, too tired for blame. "We all missed each other," I said. After everyone left, Michael stayed behind to help me gather the flowers and cards. He looked at me with those same patient eyes and said, "You did everything you could, Ma, but guilt is a stubborn thing." That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop wondering if I could have fixed it sooner. If I'd just driven to the city, knocked on his door, forced him to listen, maybe he wouldn't have died thinking there was a wall between us. The next morning, I found something tucked in my coat pocket, a folded piece of paper. It was Daniel's handwriting. The nurse said he'd left it with her, just in case. "Mom, I don't know if I'll ever get to say this in person, but I wanted you to know. I was angry for the wrong reasons. I thought you chose Michael over me. But I realize now, you chose what Dad would have wanted. You gave love a home. Tell Michael I'm proud of him. and keep the porch light on for me. Maybe I'll find it again someday. Love, Daniel. I read it once, twice, then pressed it to my chest. Tears came, but they weren't just sorrow. They were relief. That letter became my new promise, my paper promise. Not about the house, not about property, but about forgiveness. Because sometimes what we inherit isn't land or money. Sometimes it's the courage to let go of what hurt us. After the funeral, Michael and I drove home together in silence. The road stretched long and silver beneath the fading light. When we reached the old house, I looked at it differently. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a gift, still standing, still full of stories, still waiting for peace to return. And I knew then that the years of silence had finally done their work. They had turned grief into wisdom. And wisdom, my dear, is just love that's learned how to be quiet. After the funeral, the house felt different. The silence wasn't painful anymore, just deep, like a long exhale after years of holding your breath. Michael stayed for a few days, helping me sort through old boxes, fold Daniel's suits for donation, and pack away the things that were too full of memory to look at yet. One evening, as we sat surrounded by stacks of photo albums and letters, Michael opened an old tin box I hadn't seen in years. "Ma," he said, "what's this?" I turned and there it was, Thomas's handwriting on the lid. The label read, "Property papers. Keep safe." I felt a chill run through me. We'd used that box for decades, but I'd thought everything in it had already been transferred to the lawyer long ago. Inside, there were folded documents, a few receipts from when Thomas was building the house, and a letter sealed in an envelope, yellowed with time. Across the front, in Thomas's familiar script, were the words, "For Clara, to be opened when the boys are grown." My heart trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a single page, written in his steady hand, "My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, it means time has carried us farther than I could. I built this house for you, not for ownership, but for belonging. When the time comes to pass it on, promise me you'll give it to the one who keeps your heart at peace. Not the richest, not the loudest, the one who stays when the world grows quiet. That's who it belongs to. Love always, Thomas." I couldn't speak. I just sat there, reading his words over and over, the ink blurring beneath my tears. Michael was silent beside me. Finally, he said softly, "He must have known." "Known what?" I asked. "That I'd be the one who stayed." I reached for his hand. "You didn't stay out of duty, Michael. You stayed out of love." He smiled. "Maybe both." That night, long after he'd gone home, I sat at the kitchen table with Thomas's letter. All those years, I'd thought I'd made the decision about the house on my own. But it turned out the promise had been made long before, written in the same handwriting that built our lives. And then something else came to me. Something Mr. Willis, the lawyer, had said once. Grief makes people grab at what's left. Maybe that's what Daniel had done. Maybe he wasn't angry about losing the house. Maybe he was angry about losing us. The next morning, I called Mr. Willis and asked him to come by again. He arrived with his briefcase and that same patient smile. "What can I help with, Mrs. Harper?" "I need to make a change," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "To the will?" "Yes," I said, "to the heart of it." He chuckled. "I don't think that's a legal term, but go on." I showed him Thomas's letter, the one that said the house should go to the one who stayed when the world grew quiet. He read it, nodded slowly, and said, "That's a fine man you married, Mrs. Harper." "The best," I whispered. "But I want to make sure both my boys are part of this home, one way or another." Mr. Willis leaned back, thoughtful. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to transfer part of the property, the small cabin near the lake, to Daniel's name. Not because he earned it, but because he deserves to be remembered here." He smiled gently. "A reconciliation written in ink." "Exactly," I said. "It's what Thomas would have wanted." Over the next few days, we handled the paperwork quietly. Michael helped me clean out the cabin, sweeping dust, airing the curtains, fixing the hinges. When we were done, we stood by the door, watching the light fall across the water. "This place could use some laughter again," I said. He nodded. "Maybe one day someone will bring it back." Later that evening, after he'd gone, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The sky was full of stars, and the lake shimmered like glass. I thought about all the choices we make in life, the ones that divide us and the ones that bring us back together. I realized that love doesn't always arrive with trumpets, and forgiveness doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it's just a signature on a page, a quiet act that says, "I still love you, even from here." A week later, Lena called. Her voice was soft, uncertain. "Mrs. Harper," she said, "I came across a box of Daniel's things. There's something I think you should have." She came by the next day with a small wooden frame wrapped in a scarf. When I unwrapped it, I found a photograph. Daniel, as a child, sitting on Thomas's shoulders in front of the half-built house. Across the bottom, in Daniel's handwriting, were the words, "For the man who built it and the woman who kept it home." I felt my breath catch. Lena said quietly, "He kept that picture by his bedside till the very end." I looked up at her, tears in my eyes. "Thank you, dear. You have no idea what this means." She smiled faintly. "He wanted you to have it, said it was his way of coming home." When she left, I placed the frame on the mantel, beside Thomas's letter. And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel divided anymore. It felt whole, not because of walls or deeds, but because love had finally come full circle. That night, I wrote a letter of my own. "My dear sons, the house your father built was never meant to be about ownership. It was about belonging, and you both belong here, in your own ways. One stayed, one returned, and both were loved beyond measure. If these walls ever echo again, I hope they whisper what I'm writing now. Love doesn't choose sides, it builds bridges. Mom." I folded it neatly and placed it beside Thomas's note, sealing the past with forgiveness and faith. A year has passed since Daniel's funeral. The house feels softer now, lighter somehow, as though time itself has come to rest here. The walls don't ache the way they used to. The air smells of lilac and lemon, and in the mornings, the light through the lace curtains feels like a quiet blessing. Every Sunday, Michael still comes by. He brings groceries, mows the lawn, and sometimes just sits with me on the porch as the world hums along at its own pace. He doesn't talk much about Daniel, and I don't ask him to. But sometimes, when the light hits his face just right, I see his father's eyes looking back at me. Gentle, steady, patient. It's strange how love keeps showing up, even after everyone's gone. I find it in the creak of the floorboards, in the scent of Thomas's old jacket, in the letters tucked inside my Bible, and most of all, I find it down by the lake, in the small cabin that once felt forgotten, but now feels alive again. Michael fixed the roof last autumn. He said it'd be a shame to let the place fall apart. We swept it out together, dust and cobwebs and years of quiet memories. I hung white curtains on the windows and placed a little wooden cross on the mantel. Then, one afternoon, I took Daniel's framed photograph, the one Lena gave me, and set it on the windowsill facing the water. The sunlight caught it perfectly, and for a moment, I could almost see them both there. Thomas and Daniel, shoulder to shoulder, smiling at me. That's when I decided what I wanted to do. A few weeks later, I called Mr. Willis, the lawyer, one last time. When he arrived, I handed him a fresh letter I'd written. He adjusted his glasses, smiling. "Another change, Mrs. Harper?" "Just a small one," I said. "I'm getting older, and I want to make sure the house and the cabin find their way home." He nodded. "You've already split the property between Michael and Daniel's name." "Yes," I said, "but I want to make one more addition." "And that is?" he asked. I smiled. "The cabin will belong to whoever keeps it open for the next generation. For family, or for anyone who needs a place to rest. I don't want it locked up. I want it lived in." He paused, then nodded with quiet admiration. "That's a fine legacy, Mrs. Harper." I smiled. "It's Thomas's, really. I'm just keeping the promise he started." That evening, after he left, I walked down to the lake. The sky was painted gold and rose, the water glimmering like it held a secret. I sat on the porch of the little cabin, listening to the frogs begin their song, and I felt a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. When I looked across the lake, I thought of all the things this place had witnessed. First steps, last goodbyes, arguments, laughter, forgiveness. Every plank, every window, every echo of footsteps was part of the same story. Ours. I whispered to the stillness, "We made it, Thomas. We really did." That night, Michael stopped by the cabin. He brought 2 mugs of coffee and handed me one. "I was thinking," he said softly, "maybe we could fix up the dock next spring? Paint the cabin too? Daniel would have liked that." I smiled. He would. He always loved this lake. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't need filling. Finally, Michael said, "You know, Ma, I used to think you gave me this place because I was the one who stayed. But now, I think you gave it to me because you knew I'd share it." I looked at him, tears stinging my eyes. "That's exactly why, son." He smiled, reached over, and squeezed my hand. For the first time in a long time, the air between us felt whole, like every crack had finally been mended with light. A week later, Lena visited. She brought flowers for the garden and stayed for tea. She walked through the cabin slowly, touching the old furniture, running her fingers across the windowsills. "It feels like him," she whispered. "It always will," I said. Then she looked at me and smiled. "Thank you for forgiving me." "There's nothing to forgive, dear," I said. "We were all just trying to find our way back home." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "Then I guess we finally did." After she left, I sat by the window in the cabin, watching the sunset. The water turned to gold, then silver, then disappeared into the quiet dark. And in that fading light, I could almost hear Thomas's voice again, steady and sure, whispering the same words he'd written so many years ago. "Give it to the one who stays when the world grows quiet." Only now I understood. He hadn't just meant Michael. He meant all of us, anyone who carries love forward, no matter the storms, no matter the years. I've kept both their letters, Thomas's and Daniel's, folded together in one envelope now, tucked in the drawer of this little cabin. And every now and then, when the wind rustles through the trees, I imagine their voices blending together, saying, "We're home, Clara, you can rest." Sometimes I still hear footsteps on the porch, soft, familiar ones, and I smile instead of turning around, because I know that some loves don't end, they just change rooms. So I pour myself a cup of tea, sit by the window, and watch the light ripple across the lake. The house on the hill stands proud, the cabin below it glows warm, and for the first time in a long, long while, I feel that everything is exactly where it's meant to be. I whisper into the twilight, "Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, my boys. You kept your promises." Then I close my eyes and let the peace settle over me, like the hush of evening on the water, like the heartbeat of a home that never really let go. If you like my video, then don't forget to subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon for more updates.